This week, Dana White announced the top 3 fights for the UFC 320 pay-per-view card, with Alex Pereira rematching Magomed Ankalaev, Merab defending his title against Cory Sandhagen, and then Jiri Prochazka taking on Khalil Rountree. So I just wanted to go through, kind of give my initial thoughts and my early picks for these 3 matchups. I'm not setting these predictions in stone. I could potentially change them as I look more into these fights, but this is just kind of how I'm viewing these fights right now and how I'm leaning with who I think is going to win and how they get it done. So we got to start off here with the main event, Magomed Ankalaev taking on Alex Pereira. Typically, when you have a fan favorite like an Alex Pereira and they lose a very close competitive fight, it's something that people kind of hold on to for a very long time. They're always bringing it up, but kind of feels like this one's just been swept under the rug and everyone just kind of moved on, because this fight was very, very close, very competitive. I do think it could have gone either way. Most people seem to agree that Ankalaev won rounds 2 and 4. And I think most people agree that Pereira won rounds 1 and 5. And then you kind of have round 3 being the swing factor. Narrative-wise, this fight actually kind of reminded me of the Islam Makhachev-Alexander Volkanovski first fight, where obviously not comparing it entertainment-wise because that was like potential fight of the year. This fight was definitely pretty boring. But you had a matchup where you have someone who's a super high-level striker. For the Pereira fight, obviously it's Pereira. And then for Volk, it was Volk. And then you have them going up against someone who you think is really going to test them in the grappling department, being Islam Makhachev and Magomed Ankalaev. Now, I do understand Magomed is actually more of a striker than he is a grappler, but for this specific matchup, I think a lot of people thought he was going to be very grappling heavy. And I think the takeaway from both of these fights was like, all right, the guy that was supposed to come in and wrestle and grapple is a lot better of a striker than we initially thought. And then the guy who was supposed to come in and be the striker, they actually have better grappling than we anticipated, where I think a lot of people thought Volk would win the exchanges on the feet and he'd probably struggle to stuff the takedowns. Volk did a great job kind of mitigating the grappling of Islam Makhachev, but Islam also did a great job holding his own on the feet. For Alex Pereira, he did a great job in the grappling department, but Magomed did a great job staying safe, not getting hit, landing the big shots of his own, and being the one to actually hurt Alex Pereira in this matchup. And so, like I said, Pereira actually did do a great job, stuffed all 12 takedowns, and he was really only controlled heavily on the cage in like one round. That was round 4, and then like a round and a half in round 5. But like the first 3 rounds, it was pretty much all at range. He was not getting pinned. He obviously was not getting taken down. But in the striking department, Pereira was just way too patient. He's at his best when he's mixing things up, working all 3 levels. And he pretty much had like 0 success with his hands, where it was just a bunch of kicks, most of them to the leg. He only landed 11 significant strikes on Magomed Ankalaev's head compared to Ankalaev landing 36 headshots. And like the leg kicks are a good weapon. Obviously, Pereira has great leg kicks. And also specifically against Ankalaev, who has kind of struggled with dealing with that. So it's not that he shouldn't be throwing the leg kicks, but you need a little bit of a more well-rounded attack, and I do think he's going to bring that in this second matchup. So I think you have this kind of weird dynamic where Alex Pereira at 38 years old, typically that's not the guy that's going to have like more room to grow in between fights. But I think you could make the case that like from an MMA perspective, Pereira might actually be improving at a quicker rate, not because of his age, just like he's so much greener in the sport, but like he could still be making big leaps in terms of his grappling defense and, you know, feeling more confident in the clinch and stuff like that. And so I feel like heading into the second matchup, he's going to have a lot of confidence in his takedown defense, and it's probably only getting better, like I mentioned. I think the kind of timidity on the feet was really due to him just being worried about overextending, getting taken down. But when you watch that fight and he sees how well he did in that area, I do think he's probably going to unload a little bit more than he did in that initial matchup. Also, I know Magomed was the guy to land the big shot. If they fight 100 times, I feel more confident in Alex Pereira being the guy to have that big moment or the big moments in the matchup. So actually right now, I'm leaning towards the underdog in picking Alex Pereira. I just think that if he did do such a great job with the grappling last time, I feel like he's going to come in with a better game plan, be a little bit more aggressive on the feet. He's going to have the power advantage. And so I'm going to pick him by decision, but I do think it's going to be a very close, very competitive fight. And Magomed's just like not going to overextend. He's not going to put himself in a ton of danger. And so like the margins are probably going to be pretty small. Then for the co-main event here, the title fight between Merab and Sandhagen, I'm really excited for this fight. I'd probably say that Cory Sandhagen's like my favorite active fighter in the UFC right now, and I think a lot of people are counting him out. I'm pretty intrigued by the game plan that Cory Sandhagen's going to bring into this fight. He's already talked about how he's not going to shy away from the grappling exchanges. That's definitely something we kind of saw with O'Malley, where it seemed like he was just really terrified to get taken down. Kind of a similar thing in the Petr Yan fight. He's also talked about how he wants to be a little bit more intentional with his movement, his footwork, where it's going to be less just like laterally moving around the cage and burning a lot of energy that way. And I think we actually saw that in the Davis and Figueiredo fight, where he's still going to move a lot. That's, his style. He switches stances, all of that stuff. But I do feel like he held his ground a little bit more, kind of stayed planted on some of his shots. Whereas in previous matchups, it seemed like just a lot of like touching, just trying to outpoint the guy to win a decision. Now, overall, I do think Cory Sandhagen's kind of an underrated grappler, both offensively and defensively. He won those Chito Vera and Rob Font fights with his offensive grappling. He also limited Umar to 5 minutes of control time, had some great scrambles in that matchup, never really got put in bad spots where he was getting threatened to get finished. And Umar, I know he got out grappled by Merab, but Merab's the man. Like, Umar is still a very, very high level grappler. And outside of the Sean O'Malley fights, like, Merab isn't really known for having this elite control. This is one of the reasons why, especially in the first matchup, I thought Sean would have a decent shot, because you look at the Petr Yan fight and it's like he's shooting 48 times. There are going to be so many entries for, Sean to potentially land a big shot, or anyone to land a shot coming in. It's pretty clear I either underestimated Petr Yan's takedown defense or just overstated Sean O'Malley's, or a combination of the two, because Merab was able to go in there and just not shoot a ton and be able to take and hold Sean O'Malley down. Now, my concern heading into this matchup is the fact that over time, it does seem like Cory Sandhagen's style has become less and less dangerous, where he's trying to be really perfect, trying to be really precise, not taking a lot of risks, and even limiting some of the big explosive shots that he was able to land previously. Like, he's not going to have this crazy KO power in his hands, but we saw the flying knees, the spinning kicks, things like that were able to get him knockouts, like the Frankie Edgar fight. I want to say he hurt TJ Dillashaw with a flying knee, knocked out Marlon Moraes with the spinning wheel kick. But I do think he kind of worked to address that in the Figgy matchup and did seem more dangerous, more aggressive in that fight. Now, a lot of this has been, very centered around Cory Sandhagen, his skill set. I am very high on Cory. Like I said, he is my favorite fighter right now. But Merab is the bantamweight GOAT. He has the best cardio in UFC history. He has made very, very good fighters look pretty hopeless in there. And I just can't reasonably pick against him. I'm going to pick Merab in pretty much every matchup at 135 until he loses. And so my prediction for this fight is that Merab wins a decision, but I think Cory Sandhagen is going to put up a good account for himself. I think he's going to do better than people expect, but I still think Merab's going to get the win here. His grappling is just so dominant. His pace is unmatched, and so I think he takes it over 5 rounds. And then the third and final fight here, we have Jiri Prochazka taking on Khalil Rountree. Potential number 1 contender fight, especially if Magomed Ankalaev wins, because it's a fresh matchup for him against both of these dudes. This kind of feels like a matchup where you're looking at it and you're like, Khalil Rountree, way more technical. He's going to land way more. He's so much cleaner on the feet, way sharper. And then Jiri just ends up nuking him at some point. Like the Derek Lewis meme when he's fighting Cyril Gane. And it's like, Cyril, he's way faster, way better footwork. He's going to piece him apart on the feet. And you list all the amazing things that Cyril Gane does. And it's like Derek Lewis, round 1 knockout. That's kind of how I feel in this fight, where I do think Khalil's going to be more effective. I think he's going to be able to land at a higher clip. I think he's going to look to beat up the legs of Jiri. That's kind of been a deficiency in some of his recent matchups. But I also feel like it just might not matter, where I don't think Rountree has that total nuclear power to put away Jiri, who is so incredibly durable. And Jiri has that chaotic style that kind of works just because he does have a great chin and he's super explosive. He's very powerful. And I will say, I do think he showed some defensive improvement in that Jamal Hill fight, at least attempted to get his hands up and, stayed relatively safe in that matchup. But we see in the Rakic fight, Rakic in the first round and a half is having a ton of success. He's landing the much better shots, and Jiri's just eating it. And then when Rakic starts to fade a little bit, Jiri's going to land some of these big shots. And when Jiri does land, it's just a different type of power. I think Jiri's also going to have a pretty solid size advantage in this matchup, at least in terms of his frame. He's actually not a super heavy 205er, but I do think he's going to be like the much taller, longer reach guy. So I think Jiri gets this one done. I'll go Jiri Prochazka round 2 knockout. If Jiri wins and Alex wins, which is, my picks, I don't know if they run the trilogy just because we've seen it twice and it hasn't been super competitive, but obviously, it's a fun fight. I will always tune in to watch Alex Pereira take on Jiri. And then if Magomed wins, I think it could be an interesting matchup where you have like the, technical, super patient Magomed against Jiri, who's going to fight like, his hair's on fire. So those are my initial predictions here. Like I said, could change them over time, but feel pretty decent. I think the one I might consider changing would be Magomed Alex, but as of right now, I do lean towards Poatan. So let me know your thoughts down below. Let me know your picks, who you guys going with in these 3 fights. But thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.